He was born in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, in a place most NFL scouts have never visited and most football fans could not point to on a map. He grew up watching his favorite quarterback, a fellow Hawaiian, a fellow Oregon Duck, make it to the NFL and dare to dream that the same road could one day be his. He spent 6 full years in college football. 6 years! He played more games than any quarterback in the history of college football. He transferred 3 times, rebuilt his career from the ground up each time, earned a Heisman Trophy finalist placement, led a team to an undefeated regular season, broke nearly every passing record in the history of the sport. He did everything a quarterback could possibly do in college. Every single thing. And when his moment finally came, when the Cleveland Browns called his name in the 3rd round of the 2025 NFL draft and handed him the keys to a franchise that has not had a real starting quarterback since the Obama administration, he walked into that building and proceeded to have one of the most disappointing debut seasons of any quarterback, taken in the top 100 picks in modern NFL history. And now, as of this week, as of today, March 9th, 2026, the insiders who cover this team are saying publicly, on radio, in print, in reports that are circling the entire league, that the Cleveland Browns may have already decided they have seen enough of Dillon Gabriel, that they are open to trading him, that they may cut him if no trade materializes, that a 25-year-old quarterback who set records that will stand for decades in college, football might not make it past his 2nd year in the NFL. That is the story we are telling today. And it is more complicated, more painful, and more revealing about how professional football actually works than anything you have read about the Cleveland Browns this offseason, to understand everything that is happening right now, to understand why Dillon Gabriel's future in Cleveland has collapsed this quickly. You have to go back to the very beginning. Not the draft, not the combine, all the way back to a small town on the island of Oahu in the middle of the Pacific. Dillon Gabriel was born on December 28, 2000 in Mililani, Hawaii. He comes from a family with a strong athletic background. His mother, Dory Gabriel, played college softball for Loyola Marymount. He is the middle of 3 brothers, all of them athletes, all of them named after former NFL players. Dillon was named after running back Corey Dillon. His older brother Garrison was named after running back Garrison Hurst. His younger brother Romang was named after Romang Gabriel, the Filipino-American quarterback who won the NFL Most Valuable Player Award in 1969. U.S. Embassy and Consulates in China, a family built on football history. Names carrying legacy from the moment they were written on birth certificates. And in this environment, growing up watching games and learning the position from his earliest days, Dillon Gabriel fell in love with the quarterback position the way only kids who grow up with football in their blood can. He grew up as a fan of fellow Oregon alumnus and NFL quarterback Marcus Mariota, who served as a mentor throughout his career. U.S. Embassy and Consulates in China, a Hawaiian quarterback who made it to the NFL, who was taken 2nd overall, who played in the league for years. That was the model. That was the aspiration. And Gabriel chased it with a work ethic that produced numbers at his high school that were almost impossible to believe. Gabriel attended Mililani High School, where he led his team to their 1st division, won state championship, and concluded his prep career with a state record: 9,948 passing yards and 105 touchdowns. In his senior year, he threw for 3,754 yards and 38 touchdowns, earning the 2018 to 2019 Gatorade Hawaii Player of the Year award, the national nearly 10,000 passing yards in high school, a state record that has his name attached to it permanently. And despite all of that production, despite that level of dominance at the high school level, the major college programs were not exactly lining up. Rated a 3-star recruit by 247 Sports, Gabriel initially committed to play for the Army Black Knights during his senior year of high school. However, after receiving offers from Georgia, UCF, and USC, he decommitted and ultimately chose the University of Central Florida, drawn by the opportunity to compete for the starting quarterback position and earn immediate playing time. U.S. Embassy and Consulates in China, 3 stars. That is the recruiting world's polite way of saying talented, but not a sure thing. Not the 5-star prospects who get the national profiles and the ESPN analysts breaking down their film. A 3-star kid from Hawaii, choosing UCF over Army because he wanted to compete for a starting job immediately. That decision right away would define every move he ever made, and he delivered immediately. In his freshman year at UCF, Gabriel threw for 3,653 yards and 29 touchdowns, setting a new UCF freshman record. FDD as a true freshman, 19 years old, walking onto a Division I college football field for the first time and setting program records. Then, his sophomore year was even better statistically. And UCF went 6-4 in a pandemic-affected season. Then came the injury that threatened too. And everything before it began in 2021. Gabriel was coming off a great season and was widely regarded as one of the best quarterbacks in the AAC, but his follow-up campaign lasted only 3 games, when he broke his collarbone on the last play of a comeback attempt at Louisville. That turned out to be his last play at UCF, the White House, 3 games, 1 broken collarbone, and suddenly everything changed. Because what looked like a clear path, stay at UCF, finish the career, rack up records, get drafted, evaporated the moment that collarbone snapped against Louisville. He entered the transfer portal. And what happened next was the kind of drama that only the modern college football era could produce. Upon leaving UCF following the 2021 season, Gabriel committed to UCLA in the transfer portal. But hours before he was set to officially attend a class in Los Angeles, he flipped his commitment to Oklahoma to play for his former Knights offensive coordinator Jeff Lebby, who had just arrived in Norman as Oklahoma's new offensive coordinator. That back and forth was certainly a gut punch to Chip Kelly and UCLA, which absolutely thought Gabriel was set to be the Bruins quarterback. The White House hours before classes started, he was supposed to be a Bruin. UCLA had announced it. And then, hours before he was supposed to walk into that building, he changed his mind. He went to Oklahoma instead. And not because of some grand strategic calculation. Because the man who had coached him at UCF was now at Oklahoma and wanted him. That is the relationship business of college football in its purest form. Gabriel spent 2 seasons at Oklahoma, throwing for 6,828 yards and 55 touchdowns against just 12 interceptions. He also rushed for 688 yards and 18 touchdowns across those 2 seasons, earning 2 All-Big 12 selections and helping the Sooners reach a 10-win season in his second year. U.S. Embassy and Consulates in China, 2,000 yards rushing, 55 passing touchdowns, 2 All-Big 12 honors. By any reasonable standard, his Oklahoma tenure was a success. But in the world of college football transfers, success does not mean permanence. And after 2 seasons with the Sooners, Gabriel was on the move again. Gabriel announced his transfer to Oregon on December 9th, 2023, just 5 days after entering the NCAA transfer portal. For his final year of collegiate eligibility, his 6th overall. This extra year resulted from the NCAA's decision to grant college football players an additional season of eligibility because of the COVID-19 pandemic, combined with the redshirt season he had used after sustaining the broken clavicle in 2021. U.S. Embassy and Consulates in China, 5 days in the portal. Then Oregon, the school of Marcus Mariota, the place where his idol had played. And what he did in that final year was nothing short of extraordinary. Gabriel engineered an impressive assault on the sports quarterback record books through his 64-game career. He finishes with 189 total touchdowns minus 155 passing, 33 rushing, 1 receiving. His 2 passing touchdowns against Ohio State in the Rose Bowl tied him with Case Keenum atop the all-time FBS passing touchdown list. Wikipedia during his senior year at Oregon. Gabriel received multiple Big Ten honors, first team selection, MVP, quarterback of the year, and offensive player of the year. He received first team All-American honors and finished third in Heisman Trophy voting, behind Colorado's Travis Hunter and Boise State running back Ashton Jeanty. The national, third in Heisman voting, first team All-American, Big Ten MVP, all-time FBS touchdown leader. Those are the credentials Dillon Gabriel brought to the 2025 NFL Draft. 6 years of college football. More games started than any quarterback in the history of the sport. And a record book that has his name written on nearly every page. And when he walked into the combine in the pre-draft process, the scouts and evaluators sat down with him, watched his tape, measured his body, and reached a conclusion that had been forming in their minds for months, according to PFF's draft board. Gabriel was the 164th ranked prospect in the entire 2025 draft class going into draft weekend. Their assessment was blunt. Gabriel lacks the ideal height, weight, and arm strength to be an NFL quarterback. His best quality was his accuracy, ranking first in adjusted completion rate at 81.9%. If he could overcome his physical limitations, Gabriel might become a backup quarterback in the NFL. Bleacher Report. Might become a backup. That was the ceiling. Not a starter. Not a franchise quarterback. A backup. And the physical measurements backed that assessment up in a way that the statistics from 6 years of college football could not erase. Gabriel, measured at 5 feet 11 inches at the NFL. Combined in February 2025. The prototype for NFL quarterbacks is someone well over, say, 5 feet tall. Joe Flacco is 6'6". The same as Justin Herbert and Trevor Lawrence. Not every successful QB has fit that mold. Super Bowl champion Russell Wilson is also 5'11". And Drew Brees was 6 feet exactly. But the physical concerns were real, and they were consistent across multiple evaluators. CNN, yet the Cleveland Browns walked to the podium on day 2 of the 2025 NFL Draft and called his name with the 94th pick. Third Honji. Day 2 selection. A pick reserved for players a team genuinely believes in as future contributors. And General Manager Andrew Barry went to the microphone and defended the choice with language that was warm, specific, and clearly genuine. We spent a lot of time with Dillon throughout this process. Barry said at the podium. We brought him in right after the combine, did obviously the private visit and workouts out in Eugene, decorated college career, and very accurate and very poised. We think he's an excellent player, and felt like he was the most appropriate player to pick. Military Times, the most appropriate player to pick. That is the language of a front office that has made a decision and is standing behind it. And at the moment Barry said those words, there was a quarterback still sitting in a room somewhere, watching the draft on television, who had not yet heard his name called. A quarterback named Shedder Sanders, who most analysts considered a better pro prospect than Gabriel, who was still on the board at pick 94, and who would not be selected until pick 144. The following day, in the 5th round that sequenced Gabriel in the 3rd, Sanders in the 5th, both by the same franchise, set the stage for everything that followed. Because from the moment those 2 picks were made, the Cleveland Browns had created a quarterback situation with no clean resolution. They had told the world, through the order of their draft selections, that they believed in Dillon Gabriel more than Shedder Sanders. And the 2025 season would be a very public, very painful examination of whether that belief was warranted. The answer came quickly. And it was not kind. Gabriel's first 4 starts in the NFL were, statistically, a disaster. He posted a 25.8 QBR ranked 32nd in the entire NFL and a 54.5 PFF grade, placing him 34th out of 36 graded quarterbacks. For context, when the Browns went 0-16 in their infamous 2017 season, the quarterbacks who started games for that winless team posted higher QBRs than Gabriel was producing in 2025. Yahoo Sports worse than the 2017 Browns quarterbacks on a statistical basis. That is a sentence that requires a moment to absorb fully. The 2017 Cleveland Browns went 0-16. They are one of the most famous symbols of NFL futility in the modern era. And the man the 2025 Browns had chosen as their starter was putting up numbers that compared unfavorably to the quarterbacks from that team. Gabriel ranked last in the league with just 0.9 yards per attempt through his early starts. He had not proven he could threaten defenses vertically at all. When asked about the offense's struggles, he was honest. We were explosive on that first drive and want to continue to create that. But sustaining third downs is where we've got to be better at, and it starts with me, for sure. ESPN starts with me. That is a quarterback taking responsibility. That is maturity and accountability. But accountability does not fix arm strength. It does not extend your height. It does not add velocity to throws. That are floating into coverage because the window was too tight and the ball too slow to beat an NFL cornerback to the spot, following a 32-13 loss to the New England Patriots that dropped the Browns to 2-6. Head coach Kevin Stefanski was asked directly whether he was sticking with Gabriel as his starter. His answer was yes. He also explicitly shut down the possibility of Sanders starting a game in the near future. That's not my focus, Stefanski said. Yahoo Sports, Sanders was not the focus. Gabriel was the guy. Even Achidois Minix, even with the metrics screaming that the third-round pick was not performing at a starting NFL level. Stefanski was loyal. Stefanski believed. But then came the moment that ended Gabriel's season and changed the entire trajectory of the Cleveland Browns quarterback story. Gabriel's debut came to an abrupt end when he sustained a season-ending injury. With Gabriel sidelined, Shedder Sanders was given his opportunity. ABC News that injury, a concussion suffered in Week 11 against Baltimore, handed the keys to the man who had been sitting on the bench for the entire first half of the season. And what Sanders did with those keys, while imperfect and uneven, was enough to permanently alter the power structure inside the Cleveland Browns quarterback room. He won a game. He threw for 360 yards in another. He made the Pro Bowl, and when the season ended, Kevin Stefanski named Sanders the starter for the final weeks and declined to give Gabriel the job back even after he was cleared from the concussion protocol. The message was delivered without a press conference, without a formal announcement, simply by the decision of which name went first on the depth chart. Shedder Sanders had taken Dillon Gabriel's starting job, and he never gave it back. By the end of the 2025 season, PFF had their final grades in. Gabriel's overall grade was 49.0, ranking him 41st out of 43 qualifying quarterbacks in the entire NFL. His passing grade was 49.6, also 41st out of 43. In total, 937 passing yards, 7 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, 1 win and 5 losses as the starter. Bleacher Report Lance Riceland of Cleveland.com gave Gabriel a score of 26 out of 50 for his first NFL season, writing that Gabriel is a young player who can be the right fit for the Browns only in very select situations. When the pressure is on and the defense is closing in, Gabriel simply does not have what it takes. Bleacher Report when he's 6 out of 50. That is an F, not a near pass. Not an incomplete, an outright failing grade from the local reporter, who covers this team every single day of the year and who had been willing to give Gabriel the benefit of the doubt for months. The man closest to the story had seen enough. Then the offseason began, and it brought a coaching change that removed the last person inside that facility who had been Gabriel's advocate. Kevin Stefanski was fired. The head coach who had drafted Gabriel, who had started him over Sanders, who had publicly defended him week after week, gone. In his place, the Browns hired Todd Monken. the offensive coordinator who had spent 3 years in Baltimore, engineering one of the most sophisticated offensive systems in professional football around Lamar Jackson. Monken is an elite offensive mind. But Monken is also a man who had never coached Dillon Gabriel, who had no pre-existing loyalty to him, and who arrived in Cleveland with fresh eyes and a completely different idea of what kind of quarterback could run his system effectively at the NFL. Combine in February. Monken addressed his full quarterback room. His words about Sanders were enthusiastic and specific. His words about Gabriel were noticeably different. I'm excited about Shedder, excited about Deshaun and Dillon, Monken said. I'm excited about the prospects, not only in free agency, but also in the draft, and we'll see where it all falls. Ultimately, you've got to do whatever you need to do, especially at that position, to put yourself in a position to score points. Wikipedia one sentence. Gabriel got one sentence alongside Watson in a list that Monken recited. There was no elite playmaking ability. Those words were reserved for Sanders. There was no specific insight into what Monken sees in Gabriel, no quality he highlighted, no reason he gave for being excited beyond the generic enthusiasm he showed for the entire position room. That is the language of a head coach who respects a player professionally but has no particular conviction that he is part of the answer. Zach Jackson of The Athletic, one of the most connected reporters covering this franchise, drew the line clearly. It's fair to assume the Browns don't view Gabriel as more than a long-term backup. So, he could be moved if any team is interested. Wikipedia could be moved. That is the report from the most credentialed insider covering the Cleveland Browns. A long-term backup. A trade candidate. A player whose stock has dropped from a third-round draft selection to a potential fifth round return in the trade market in the span of a single disappointing season. Then came Mary Kay. Cabot's radio. Appearance on 92.3. The Fan on March 7th, just 48 hours ago. Her words were the most direct and the most damaging of anything that has been said about Gabriel this offseason. If they bring in another guy, then I think they would be open to trading Dillon Gabriel. I think that's something to watch for over the next week. If they can get something for Dillon, maybe they've seen enough of him. Fox News? Maybe they have seen enough of him. 5 words. From the person who is inside the building. From the reporter who knows Andrew Barry's thinking. Who hears the conversations happening in the hallways of the facility in Berea. Who has been covering this team long enough to understand the difference between a player the front office is publicly distancing themselves from and a player they are privately rooting for. When Cabot says maybe they have seen enough, she is not speculating. She is reporting. Cabot went even further in her analysis. She noted that the new coaching staff and the offensive system that came with it could facilitate Gabriel playing elsewhere after just one season in Cleveland. Maybe Todd Monken has seen enough of him and what his scheme would be for a guy like that. She said, and they would consider moving him. In that scenario, then you maybe go out and find another developmental guy. All Jazira Monken's scheme might not fit Gabriel. That is a specific and informed piece of analysis. Because Monken's offense, the system he ran in Baltimore, the system he is installing in Cleveland, is built on vertical concepts, on getting the ball downfield, on quarterbacks who can challenge safeties and compress coverage with their arm. That is not Dillon Gabriel's game. Gabriel, underneath, précision passée. He throws completions. He manages the field. He does not throw the ball 35 yards in the air with velocity and timing that stresses NFL coverage at the second and third level. And if Monken looks at his system and then looks at Gabriel's film and concludes that the match is not there, that the quarterback's tools do not align with what the offense requires, then no amount of loyalty to a coaching staff that no longer exists will keep Gabriel on this roster. Cabot also offered this assessment of where Gabriel currently stands in the Cleveland front office's view. I know the Browns still like Gabriel and believe he has good upside potential. But he started 6 games for them, and he's not really in the mix to start for them this season. If they don't trade him, which they're open to, they keep him as a developmental QB on a rookie contract who can start games for them if necessary. CNNA, developmental QB on a rookie contract who can start games if necessary. That is the organizational view of the man they gave a day to draft pick to 12 months ago. Not a starter. Not a genuine competitor for the starting job. An emergency option. A developmental backup. Someone who can fill in if both Watson and Sanders go down on the same day. That is all he is to this franchise right now. The trade market analysis is even more brutal. Gabriel was selected as a 3rd-round pick last year. Analysts believe the Browns could probably only land a 4th or 5th-round pick for him now, given the trouble he experienced in his opening season. His value has dropped by an entire round in 1 year. Military.com, and there is one final dimension to this story that nobody is talking about loudly enough. The Atlanta Falcons dimension. Former Browns head coach Kevin Stefanski now leads the Atlanta Falcons. He was in charge last spring when the Browns made Gabriel a 3rd-round pick and started him ahead of Shedder Sanders. Stefanski liked him enough to take him on day to just a year ago. League analysts have mentioned Flacco as a potential addition for Atlanta. But Gabriel could also be in play there in a trade for a day, 3-pick, perhaps a 5th or 6th rounder. Fox News, the man who drafted Gabriel, is now coaching his most likely trade destination. That is the kind of detail that makes NFL transactions feel like they have a narrative logic to them. Stefanski believed in Gabriel. Cleveland fired Stefanski. Now, Stefanski is in Atlanta, inheriting a quarterback situation left behind by Kirk Cousins' departure. And the player he believed in enough to use a day to pick on is being shopped by the franchise that replaced him. The football world is small, and it is about to get smaller for Dillon Gabriel. Here is the scenario that would definitively end Gabriel's time in Cleveland. The Browns sign Malik Willis or another veteran quarterback in free agency, and then use one of their draft picks on a developmental quarterback in April. Under those circumstances, with Watson uncuttable because of his enormous cap hit, and Sanders as the fan favorite who earned another shot in his sophomore campaign, it is hard to imagine any scenario in which Gabriel makes it to the regular season on this roster. The only way for the Browns to get anything for him is if there are multiple organizations willing to trade for him as a backup on 3 years remaining on his rookie deal. The war zone 3 years remaining on a rookie deal is actually Gabriel's best selling point right now, because it means the team that acquires him gets a young, experienced backup quarterback under cost-controlled contract for 3 seasons. In an NFL where backup quarterback contracts can run $10 to $15 million per year, a 3rd-year player with Dillon Gabriel's college pedigree, who showed he can manage an offense and protect the football on a rookie deal is not nothing. It is something. It might not be a 5th-round pick, but it is something. But here is the thing about Dillon Gabriel that gets lost in all of these reports and grades and trade discussions and depth chart analyzes. He has not given up. He has not demanded a trade. He has not used social media to fight back. He has not shown any sign of the entitlement or attitude that gets attributed to quarterbacks who were drafted higher and fell to expectations. He has showed up every day, worked every rep, accepted the diminished role with the same equanimity that he showed when he transferred 3 times and rebuilt his career from nothing. Each time, he graduated from Oklahoma with a 3.43 GPA in multidisciplinary studies and began pursuing a master's degree in human relations. He is, by every account from every person who has worked with him, a high-character person who brings intelligence and professionalism to every environment he enters. How Stump Public Media got engaged to his childhood sweetheart, Zoe Caswell, a fellow Hawaii native he met while attending middle school, on September 1st, 2024, the day after his debut for Oregon. They had met in 6th or 7th grade during an orientation class at school, and he proposed to her after his very first game as a Duck. U.S. Embassy and consulates in China. This is not a cautionary tale about a bad person. This is not a story of someone who did not work hard, did not care, did not give everything he had. This is a story about the brutal reality of professional football, that 6 years of dedication, that all-time records, that a Heisman finalist campaign, that a 3.43 GPA, that transferring 3 times and succeeding. Each time, none of it guarantees you anything once you step onto an NFL field, and the measurables that scouts flagged before the draft turn out to be exactly as limiting as they projected. Dillon. Gabriel is 25 years old. He has a fiancée from Hawaii who loves him, a business manager brother who is managing his career, 3 years left on a rookie contract, and 1 NFL season on his resume that produced a PFF grade of 49.0, third from the bottom in the league. He is standing at a crossroads that most people in his position never expected to reach this quickly. The Cleveland Browns, as of today, March 9th, 2026, have declared free agency open. They are making calls. They are weighing options. They are trying to figure out, for what feels like the 100th time in a decade, who their quarterback is. And somewhere in the noise of all those conversations, the man who broke the all-time college football record for passing touchdowns is waiting to find out whether he still has a job in the city that believed in him, at least for a few months, more than anyone else in professional football did. That is Dillon Gabriel's story. And in the NFL, it is far from over.